Now is the time, he said, when those who wish to continue the quest must harden their hearts to leave this land. Those who no longer wish to go forward may remain here for a while, but whether they stay or go, none can be sure of peace. For we are come now to the edge of doom. Here those who wish may await the oncoming of the hour, till either the ways of the world lie open again, or we summon them to the last need of Lorien. Then they may return to their own lands, or else go to the long home of those that fall in battle.
Welcome to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Today we are reading Book 2, Chapter 8, Farewell to Lorien. I am Zach.
I'm Logan.
Well, we definitely got ourselves an in-between chapter here.
Yeah, transitional. Although there's cool things that happen too. I mean,
there's definitely some cool things. I mean, we get some pretty badass speeches. We get some...
Yeah, the speeches are what you show up for this chapter, I think.
We have a lot of giving of gifts in this episode. Some really famous ones. I mean, we've talked about Gimli getting the 3 strands of Galadriel's hair a bunch of times on the pod, but
yeah,
I never realized that Legolas's bow is also strung with elf hair.
I never noticed that either. It's really weird.
So that's 2 elf hair based gifts
in one chapter. Yeah.
There's a lot of longing in this chapter. You know, they're trying to decide what to do, and they're given a choice, and they have to decide, and that choice really haunts the rest of the book. You know, until the company is broken.
Yeah,
they're debating this question: do we go east or do we go west? Do we cross the river and go directly to Mordor, or do we stop first in Minas Tirith? And that debate begins here in earnest, and people start to take sides, but it's really not ever resolved. It's kind of resolved for them.
Yeah, it is. And it's interesting that Celeborn gives them this, he underlines it really starkly.
Yeah.
You know, he's like, are you going to walk on the east side of the river or the west side of the river?
Yeah.
And he really strongly underlines it, and he's like, I can give you some boats too. So you don't have to decide for a while.
Yeah.
And so they really are in the middle of a choice, literally, you know, in the middle of this metaphor for a few miles at least.
Yeah. I mean, the other piece of longing or yearning that comes from this is just how bereft Gimli is at leaving Galadriel. And I think that's some of the most beautiful character development. I mean, we talk all the time about how the accusations of flatness of character are just so baseless.
Yeah.
Gimli goes through a legitimate transformation, life-changing transformation, because of his love of Galadriel. He also becomes legitimate friends with Legolas. There's a
big change for both of them. Yeah. I think it's kind of fascinating, you know, toward the beginning of the chapter, we've already talked about this question: which shore will you now take?
Yeah.
And Boromir, of course, has an opinion. Aragorn is really conflicted. He's
torn.
He's not settled at all. He has no idea what Gandalf might have done, and he kind of wonders whether Gandalf even had a plan.
Yeah, it's true.
And then Celeborn gives them the boats, and I think it's interesting. You know, we talked a little bit last chapter about Galadriel settling on kind of a existential or, I don't know, vocational stance toward making these kind of choices as actually ceding control.
Yeah.
Sort of like an act of faith. And she says, maybe the paths that you each shall tread are already laid before your feet, though you do not see them. Good night. And then they proceed to argue about what they should do.
Yeah, she's basically like, don't fret trying to make your decision now. Like it's not going to happen. Like she almost like foresees like, yeah, you can wear yourselves out arguing about this, but you're not actually going to come to any kind of conclusion. But they
Yeah.
don't take her advice.
Like they don't even hear her really.
Mm-mm.
But it says that Frodo spoke no word.
Yeah, Frodo listens.
And so he maybe listened to her, or maybe he's already deciding that he's like in the process of making that decision that he needs to go himself.
You talked about how last chapter Galadriel's choice is really to cede control over to fate.
Yeah.
And so much of her life up to this point has been her dominating is probably the wrong word, but like
Leading, fighting. Yeah.
Yeah. When she's fighting in wars, she's accepting the burden of a ring of power. She's using that she wields it to slow the decay, the diminishment of the elves, to set like a spiritual border around Lorien where time and the seasons don't affect it the same. It's like a veil that's placed around her land. I mean, she speaks trees into being. Like the trees of Lorien are really manifestations of her thought, and we actually get a little preview of that in her poem at the end. Like,
Yeah, her song. Yeah.
you know, she says like, I sang of leaves of gold, and leaves of gold there grew. The landscape is really like a manifestation of her power, her spiritual power. And last chapter, she was offered dominion of Middle Earth.
Mm-hmm.
Like if she had taken that gift, she would have become a Dark Lord, you know.
Right.
Not like Sauron. She would have been beautiful to behold. Mm-hmm. And she may have even done great things with it, but it would be grasping at power of dominion. And that's not what she was built for, ultimately.
The thing she does instead in this chapter is give Sam a little bit of, magic dirt, basically.
Yeah.
And I think that's really, two things are kind of connected, because a person who can, sing like trees into existence, giving away some of that power to this like little gardener. And then the description that she gives of the beauty that he can, like the beautiful garden that he can plant himself because of this power that she's like seeding,
seed. I mean, there's literally a Malorn tree seed
right in there, right? And we're very, I think, starkly told that outside the realm of Lorien there are no Malorn trees.
Yeah.
Right. And so for her to give that to Sam.
Yeah.
And then of course there's like a few paragraphs where he sort of like goes around the Shire and plants, replants trees. It's such a amazing connection back to this first book. That her seeding of that power is not her, instead of doing it as like a act of the will.
Yeah.
It's a
way of control.
Giving it to Sam and putting that goodness into a new person's expression.
I think you're so right. And if you look at like the power that she offers Sam during their like telekinetic, time of interrogation when they first arrive, he says, she offered me a garden, essentially. And there's a subtle difference between like offering someone a garden and giving them the supplies that they need to plant their own.
Yeah.
And that's the difference between Gandalf and Saruman, or Gandalf and Sauron. Like Saruman and Sauron desire to control, to dominate, to rule, to have dominion. Gandalf inspires. He recognizes the strength in other people that someone who is only convinced of their own power is completely blind to. They can't see that the halflings are powerful, capable people. Gandalf understands that intrinsically.
We talked about that with Radagast too, right? That
Oh,
Gandalf sort of
100%.
saves himself by recognizing Radagast's gifts.
Yeah, if he hadn't said to Radagast, like, hey, go tell the birds who are your friends to be on the lookout
Right.
for Black Riders. Like Gwaihir, when he comes to save Gandalf, he's
Mhm.
like, hey, I was coming to like report. I wasn't
Right.
expecting to see you up here. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah, and if Gandalf hadn't had that insight into
And you're
Radagast's strengths, then he would have been doomed. He'd
yeah,
still be there.
you're totally I mean, you're totally right that Galadriel is playing into the same way of recognizing, Sam doesn't need to be given a garden. He needs to be given
Yeah, the seeds.
he already has the gifts to plant a garden, but to give him this dirt and seeds.
It's grace. It's a grace. It's like
Yeah.
I'm gonna give part of me to help you flourish.
Yeah.
Not I'm gonna make you do what I want you to do. It's such a different way of seeing the world, and that's what really I think like is beautiful about Tolkien. It's grace. It's not dominion or power. And there's this great, we talked about it last episode, but I think it's worth mentioning again. Frodo says to Galadriel, like, hey, like, how come when I put on the ring, I'm not able to control or have power over other people?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why can't I bend people's will to my will when I put on the ring? And she says, you haven't tried.
Yeah. You're like never really even thought about doing it.
And that's what makes Frodo the perfect person to be the ring bearer. Is it never even occurs to him to try to use it. Like if Boromir puts that shit on,
You'd immediately start ordering people around.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I think she recognizes like if I put that ring on, like
She wouldn't even have to order people around. They would just immediately ask her you know,
they
what
would be like,
they want her
lead
to
me. They would
exactly.
be like, it is my like deepest desire of my heart for you to tell me exactly what to do. And that's like, yeah, like she wouldn't have to force them to listen to her. They would want it.
And that is somehow even more powerful and horrible than what Sauron does.
Yeah.
I think she's right that she would be even more
She's like, I wouldn't have slaves.
right. Yeah, that's scary.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
people line up to be dominated without even fear, out of love.
Like Frodo asked her last chapter, like, what do you want?
Mm,
And she says that what should be shall be.
yeah.
Not like that what I want would be. Not that my will be done, but
Right. And I think that's what she's saying, here. Maybe the paths that you each shall tread are already laid before your feet.
well, and that's kind of what I started this reflection on, I guess. Which is that they are about to step into boats and be swept down a river, the River Anduin. If you look at a map, the distance that they're about to travel down this river is about as far as they traveled to get to Rivendell,
Yeah.
and they're going to do it in a few days.
Right. It's so much easier on the water.
It's so much easier, and they're literally about to be like swept away by this running river. And I think there's something to that. I mean, the metaphor of like you have to decide between east and west.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned earlier, it's almost like they're like placed in the middle of this metaphor, and I think that's really insightful and true. But they're like being invited to basically do the same thing that Galadriel has done, which is basically to not to decide,
Mm-hmm.
but just to accept fate. And while the rest of the company is debating whether to go east or west, Frodo is waiting.
Yeah.
and he does not make a decision. When they reach the Falls of Ralros soon, Frodo's going to go off on his own to try and make that decision. But that decision ultimately is made for him because the orcs arrive right at that moment, and he doesn't have to ever decide. He doesn't. He makes the decision to go off on his own. But he doesn't try to convince anybody. He decides to go do it on his own. He like fully accepts his fate as the ring bearer.
Yeah, that's interesting. He does. I think that's true. I wonder if it's not the orcs as much as Boromir's.
Oh, I think that's absolutely right.
You know, I mean, whether the orcs showed up or not is less important than Boromir's ring induced
Rage monologue.
Yeah. And I think Frodo has to decide in that moment to break the company.
Yeah, it's almost like Frodo breaks the company before the orcs do.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Merry and Pippin being carried off and all of that, it becomes important to the story, but it's sort of, it's like something that would have happened anyway. Like,
Yeah,
at some point they're going to become more and more fragmented as they get toward the end of the story or something until they can come back together.
Yeah. They're going to go in like wider orbit, but then eventually be pulled back to the center of each other again.
Yeah.
But I think the theme of this book is that the hand of fate is just gently carrying us along.
Mm-hmm.
The river of fate is carrying us along, and it may not be where we want to go.
Right.
But at the end of the book, we will see that the only way the quest could have possibly been successful is for all these calamitous things to have happened.
Yeah, every bad thing that happens leads them to the good end.
Yeah. And if they fight against that river's still going to flow ultimately to that end. See what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yep.
Like the ceding of control is actually what, and just choosing to do the next best thing over and over and over again.
What's the next step you have to take to get you closer to
stay faithful? And yeah, that's just really stark to me in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
The reading that we started with today, it's the second paragraph of the chapter. It's the second time now that we've had an elf lord give the farewell speech that also includes an out.
Yeah. Yeah, Elrond does the same thing, right?
And he's like, yeah, like, hey, none of you are bound to take this journey to the end. Mm-hmm. Like, you can step aside from the quest at any point, and nobody would say that you broke faith. And Celeborn's farewell here is very similar to Elrond's.
Yeah.
But I do think that the interesting thing is he says, like, we are now come to the edge of doom. Here those who wish may await the oncoming of the hour till either the ways of the world lie open again, or we summon them to the last need of Lorien.
Mm.
They may return to their own lands or else go to the long home of those that fall in battle. So he's like, hey, you can go home, or you could stand with us when Sauron's forces come a-knocking and die beside us.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really not a choice.
No.
It's a real false choice, I think.
I mean, the choice is really made for you. Like, if the quest is successful, you can go home.
Right.
But if you stay here, that's out of your hands.
Right. Yeah.
But if you choose to continue on the quest, you might play a small part in the success of the quest, which like there's a capital Q quest here at this point. Like the second line of the paragraph is,
oh, I didn't notice that. That's interesting.
Those who wish to continue the capital Q quest must harden their hearts to leave this land. He's like, hey, I know it is like so rad here.
Harden their hearts. That's really, I mean, interesting. Obviously, it's like a biblical thing.
Yeah. I've not seen it used positively like that before.
No, usually it's Yeah, I mean, God hardens Pharaoh's heart against showing
Listening to
mercy
Moses.
to the Hebrews.
Yeah.
But to have it used in this way, yeah, you sort of have to gird yourself up to leave this beautiful place.
Yeah.
I know it's hard to leave, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So we talked about the dilemma, the debate that Celeborn really introduces, but Aragorn expands upon. And we get kind of an interesting insight into Aragorn's kind of inner dialogue here.
Mm-hmm.
I think anytime that we've had like an inner dialogue of one of the characters other than Frodo, we've tracked it. It's not common. It's not usually Tolkien's style. He usually just gives that thought process through dialogue.
Yeah, he's a fairly limited narrator. It's not like fully omniscient, but you get points where it is. Yeah.
Like we hear Frodo's thoughts all the time. Though we hear his internal thoughts less and less as the story goes on. Like we never hear Frodo's ring-induced monologue.
Right.
We hear his like temptation to put the ring on. In a couple chapters here, we'll hear him kind of like wrestle with the call of the Dark Lord to bring the ring to him, where he says like essentially like leave me alone, and then what he realizes he's actually saying is verily I come.
Yeah.
But from Two Towers on, we really don't get like a lot of like Frodo's internal dialogue, and we don't see his ring-induced monologues. We get these little like breaks in his character where at one point he threatens Gollum and says like, if you betray me, I'm going to make you choke on your food and you'll die. Or if you betray me, I'll command you to cast yourself into the fire. So we get these like little insights where we're like, oh, like Frodo, are you okay? Like, oh, but yeah, it's rare that we get this like kind of insight into someone's internal thought here. Says his own plan while Gandalf remained with them had been to go with Boromir and with his sword help to deliver Gondor, for he believed that the message of the dreams was a summons, that the hour had come at last when the heir of Elendil should come forth and strive with Sauron for the mastery. It says he really had no idea like what Gandalf's idea was or his plan was. But he says like he would not now forsake the ring. So if Frodo decides not to go with Boromir to Minas Tirith, he's like, I'll go blindly into Mordor with him and we'll just figure it out when we get there.
Mm-hmm. But that's not what Boromir.
No.
Boromir does have a plan and a duty to return to Minas Tirith.
But there's this ulterior motive that kind of like, it's always been there. You know, right. I mean, he revealed this thought at the Council of Elrond.
Mm-hmm. Like
it would be folly to not use this thing as a weapon. And yeah, he kind of shows his true colors here.
It says that he sits with his eyes fixed on Frodo as if he was trying to read the halfling's thoughts. Yeah. Which is exactly what.
Yeah. It's what Galadriel has the power to do.
Yeah, Galadriel can actually do that.
Yeah.
And
what the ring would give him the power to do.
Exactly. Boromir wants to gather all of this power to himself.
Yeah.
In order to, for an end which he sees as just, which is the defense of Minas Tirith.
Yeah.
The land that he loves, but there's also sort of a nationalistic strain there that he's, I think, living out. And it's fascinating that he starts to speak out loud.
Yeah.
Without even knowing it.
Yeah.
And he says, but if you wish to destroy the armed might of the Dark Lord, then it's folly to go without force into his domain and folly to throw away. And he's like, oh, did I just say that out loud? I mean, throw lives away.
Yeah. I was like, oh, sorry. Well, I mean, he says, if you wish only to destroy the ring.
Yeah.
Then there was little use in war and weapons, and the men of Minas Tirith cannot help. Like only destroy it? Like that's the whole quest, my dog.
Yeah, right.
That's the capital Q.
He actually understands really well what the quest is. He understands what has to be done. He
Yeah.
understands that force of arms is not going to be helpful in this. That that in the end, a smaller company. He like through his ring-induced monologue here.
Yeah.
He really reveals that he understands the wisdom of what Gandalf was all about.
Yeah.
But that's not what he desires.
No, he's
Right.
campaigning. He's lobbying here.
Yes. He's a lobbyist for Gondor. That's how he sees himself.
Well, I think he's a lobbyist for him being given the ring.
Well, right, but he's going to couch it in this narrative, about his duty, which this is how he starts.
Yeah.
I'm going to Minas Tirith alone if need be, for it's my duty, and y'all should come because of these reasons.
Yeah. But if they go to Gondor, so let's say Aragorn is like, great, Frodo, we should listen to Boromir. Boromir's right. We need to go to Gondor. We need to go to Minas Tirith. Let's just kind of play out what would happen. They would probably take a more direct route. Mm-hmm. They would get there probably without being waylaid by the orcs. Maybe. They go west and they reach the city. They stay on the western shore, and Denethor receives them. They are imprisoned. The ring is taken forcibly from Frodo. Frodo loses his mind.
Yeah.
Either Denethor or Boromir puts on the ring. Aragorn is assassinated, executed. They make it look like an accident.
Yeah.
Boromir or Denethor becomes a minor Dark Lord for a period of time until they're defeated in the Pelennor Fields because Rohan doesn't come.
Yep.
Sauron gets the ring back. Sauron marches on Lothlorien. Sauron reclaims Khazad-dûm. Sauron takes over Rivendell. Sauron marches through Bree.
The whole game is up. Yeah.
Butterbur's roasted in his own butter.
Yeah.
The Gaffer is enslaved.
Right. The Shire burns for sure.
Saruman is defeated. Orthanc is taken over again. Rohan falls. Like the whole of Middle Earth is just piece by piece taken away if they make this choice. And so Frodo, he doesn't make like a rush to judgment about Boromir. He doesn't say, okay, Boromir has fallen, but he does see like through these little cracks in Boromir's persona. Mm-hmm. He sees what his real intentions are. And there's a really interesting scene in The Two Towers when Sam and Frodo are captured by Faramir. Mm-hmm. When Frodo essentially says like, I wish it had all worked out with your brother. I'm paraphrasing here, obviously. I wish it all worked out with your brother. I wish that Aragorn and he had like just gone to Minas Tirith and then that had been it. Mm-hmm. And Faramir's like, nah, they would have quickly fallen into a rivalry. Yeah. And a civil war would have broken out. Yeah. And they would have to divide the kingdom. And Aragorn would eventually probably become king, but Boromir would have to die along the way. Right.
How diminished would Gondor be, after that civil war, right?
Exactly. And he doesn't say it explicitly, but he's like, yeah, they'd actually become rivals. They wouldn't be, Boromir wouldn't call him his king ever. And so the seeds of all that are planted here. Like if Boromir is successful in lobbying for the Western Road, the entire thing would fall apart.
Isn't that somewhere in the draft history? Boromir and Aragorn having like a battle?
Yeah. It was never written. It was just, to my knowledge, it was never written out. I think it was just
like an idea
outlined, where Tolkien was kind of like, because one thing that Tolkien did is just kind of play out all the scenarios. Like, okay, what would happen if they, so I would have to look at it, but like a brief summary is essentially that Boromir leaves the company and joins forces with Sauron. And then there's a big standoff between Aragorn and Boromir. Like a fight to the death, a duel.
Which is would be kind of awesome. But it's a totally different book.
If it was Star Wars, that's what would
Yeah,
happen.
exactly. Yeah. You sort of imagine them with lightsabers.
I have the high ground, Boromir.
Yeah. And he does like a flip over him and cuts him in half, leaves him to
Yeah,
die by
yeah.
the lava. Yeah.
What we get is infinitely better.
And I love that that insight that Faramir has, because, this is his brother. He's like, no, Boromir's not going to bend the knee to anybody.
No.
And Faramir is also, well, we'll get to it, but infinitely better than Boromir, just as
Oh
a
yeah.
human being,
Faramir. Faramir is awesome.
Yeah, he's really not tempted by the ring, not nearly to the extent
It says,
as
I wouldn't
Boromir.
pick this thing up if it was on the side of the road.
Yeah, he's kind of cut from the same cloth as Aragorn,
Yeah, or Gandalf.
or Gandalf, yeah. And so he knows very well. But I also think here in this chapter, I mean, Frodo is so perceptive. He's
Yeah, I
perceptive
mean,
he's perceptive about Boromir at the council.
in the same way that he's able to see Galadriel's ring on her finger
Yeah.
when other people can't.
He's maybe got a little of the same power as, not nearly as on the same level, but the same power that Galadriel has to understand people's thoughts. It says that there's a lot of looking here. So,
Yeah.
Boromir's sitting with his eyes fixed on Frodo, trying to read his thoughts. And then Frodo, in the next paragraph, Frodo caught something new and strange in Boromir's glance, and he looked hard at him.
Yeah.
Plainly, Boromir's thought was different from his final words. So I don't think Frodo necessarily has like magic powers here, but
Yeah.
he does have a perceptive ability here where he can see, something else is going on. It would be folly to throw away what? The Ring of Power? He said something like this at the council, but then of course Elrond corrected him.
Yeah.
And Aragorn's no help here either. Aragorn's so deep in thought that he's kind of lost. But we come to,
You want to talk about the gifts?
yeah, we come to they get Lembas first.
I mean, it seems like the gifts that we get are Limbos, boats, their cloaks,
and
then like the individual gifts.
Yeah, the cloaks are really cool. The Lembas is like, I mean, one of the elves says, "Don't eat that much. These things are given to serve you when all else fails."
Yeah, it's communion. It's Eucharist.
And then later on they all share a cup of white mead. It says.
Oh, interesting.
So it's not the fruit of the vine, but maybe it's the closest they have in Middle Earth. And they all drink from the same cup. So they do take communion here together in a couple of scenes, or across a couple scenes. And then I love the description of the cloaks.
Where's the, wait, hold on, go back. Where's the shared cup?
Now Galadriel rose from the grass, and taking a cup from one of her maidens, she filled it with white mead and gave it to Celeborn. "Now it is time to drink the cup of farewell," she said. "Drink, Lord of the Galadrim. And let not your heart be sad, though night must follow noon, and already our evening draweth nigh." Then she brought the cup to each of the company and bade them drink and farewell. Last chapter, we talked about the lambas being
thinly veiled.
Yeah, thinly veiled Eucharistic bread.
Yeah.
And I think that's what this means. This is given to you. These things are given to serve you when all else fails.
Yeah.
But then they also share the cup of what I think of as the cup of the Eucharist.
Incredible catch. I've read this so many times. I never caught this.
Yeah, I never noticed that before. I think I noticed it now because we, dwelled on last chapter or the chapter before on lembas as bread, but they're the bread of the Eucharist. But the fact that she kind of ceremoniously takes a cup, fills it with white mead, gives it to Celeborn, tells him to drink. She calls it the cup of farewell, essentially.
Yeah.
And then she brings it to each member of the company, and they all drink from the same cup.
It says, "Now it is time to drink the cup of farewell. Drink, Lord of the Galadrim.
Let not your heart be sad."
Yeah. though night might follow noon, and already our evening draweth nigh.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they're saying farewell to this period of time in their lives, like this like regardless of what happens, either they're going to be overthrown by the Dark Lord, or the ring is going to be destroyed and they're going to diminish.
Both mean the same thing in a sense.
Either
them.
way, it's an end.
Yep.
And so she's like, drink this cup of farewell, my Lord. And then she brings it to each person in the company, one by one. And then she commands them to sit on the grass. I mean, that's like got some like real strong biblical imagery of the Eucharist.
Come receive the cup, and you may be seated.
In the Gospel of John, they the Eucharistic imagery really comes in, and Eucharist is like just a fancy word for communion for anyone who is not a church nerd.
Yeah, it means thanks.
Actually. Yeah, to give thanks, Eucharisto.
Yeah.
But in the Gospel of John, it's not at the Last Supper. It's during the feeding of the 5,000, which is on a hill, and Jesus holds up the bread and says, like, unless you eat of my flesh and drink of my blood, you will not have eternal life. And he commands people to sit on the grass.
Yep.
So there's some definite like parallels here.
And I think it's liturgical. By the time John was being written, those kind of liturgical rhythms were starting to be established, I think. And so the fact that, Tolkien is a Catholic, I think, is thinking more of liturgy than he is of the gospel story. That's my guess. But I think that's what this is supposed to evoke. And then, and then you got Galadriel as like this kind of Marian, character.
Yeah.
And she's
the intercessor of this gift.
Yeah, it's definitely a rich, theological allusions are happening here.
Like, now I'm going to give you gifts.
Right, exactly.
Do you want to talk about the gifts?
Yeah, let's talk about the gifts.
So Aragorn gets a sheath for Narsil, and it's got like runes and gems, and it comes with this incantation, this blessing on his blade, which is like, the blade that is drawn from this sheath shall not be stained or broken even in defeat. So it's like, hey, it was broken before.
Yeah, not again.
Not again.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to be stained. It's going to shine. Pretty cool.
It is cool. She also says, is there anything else you need? Any other desires?
Wink, wink.
He's like,
you know what I want?
All my desire, and long held in keeping, the only treasure that I seek.
In case you have not figured it out, I am talking about your granddaughter.
Yeah.
Arwen.
Do
you want to talk about Arwen's family tree a little bit, just in case people don't know?
Sure. Yeah.
Cross your fingers, folks, that I don't screw this up, because famously, anytime I start getting into lore, I have to edit it out of the podcast. Galadriel's daughter, Celebrian, is Elrond's wife. So Galadriel is Elrond's mother-in-law.
Mm-hmm.
Elrond and Celebrian have Arwen, who will now be Aragorn's like betrothed.
Mm-hmm.
And they met in Lothlorien when Aragorn was young. Arwen was already like wicked old.
Right.
But as we discussed in the past, Arwen is like 10 out of 10 smoke show.
Yeah, big time mega babe.
Big time mega babe. And Aragorn is like, I would like to have you as my wife, please.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point in time, and we find this out in the appendices, which we might have to do a couple episodes on the appendices. I feel like they're slept on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in 10 years or whatever, when we finish the pod.
Sure.
Aragorn comes to Elrond and is like, hey, I would really like to marry your daughter, who's the most beautiful woman who ever lived. And Elrond is like, you are way too scruffy and undistinguished.
Mm-hmm.
to marry this jewel
Right.
of womanhood who's given like one line in the book.
Yeah.
The only way I will allow you to marry my daughter is if you become the king of the combined kingdoms of Gondor and Arnor.
No big deal.
Which definitely has some parallels to the ancestor, Beren, who comes to Luthien's father and says like, hey, I would very much like to marry your daughter in a cross-species marriage, please.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh yeah, go get me one of the Silmarils from the Dark Lord's crown. And then we can talk.
Do something impossible. Yeah.
Yeah. Go do this impossible thing and then it can happen.
Yeah.
But she gives him, Galadriel gives Aragorn this boon. What would you call it? This jewel.
It's almost like Galadriel gives Aragorn a
like engagement ring kind of.
Engagement ring. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of strange. But it also represents him kind of, she gives him a stone and then calls him Lesar, the elf stone of the house of Elendil.
Yeah.
So it's also,
it's almost like a knighthood.
Yeah, it is. She's like ordaining him to like do what Elrond challenged him to do.
I name the Elisar. Like, you got it in you.
And then all of a sudden it sort of spiritually or even like physically reveals him as like a king.
Yeah.
The kind of scruffy Strider exterior suddenly like falls away. And you kind of imagine him like standing up straight or something, you know? And it says that, you know, the rest of the company looks at him and it seemed
wonder
to them. Yeah, it seemed to them that many years of toil had fallen from his shoulders.
He stood tall and kingly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We get these like images of Aragorn becoming Elisar in a few pages. I mean, he's going to see the sentinels of the Argonath and look upon the faces of his ancestors.
Yeah.
And everybody's like, whoa, like,
looks like Aragorn.
This is not a ranger. This is a king.
Yep.
The other gifts are interesting. Boromir gets a belt of gold. Merry and Pippin get silver belts with a clasp wrought like a golden flower.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned earlier, Legolas gets a bow, which he will use to great effect to slay a fell beast of the Nazgul in a little while. So this bow is like a super bow.
Yeah.
And it's strung with elf hair.
So weird. So weird.
Gimli's not the only one that gets an elf hair.
Yeah.
Sam gets the gift of the soil and the seed, which he kind of forgets about until one of the last chapters. And then we get Gimli's moment.
Yeah, and this dialogue goes on for a little while.
Like a solid page of this very short chapter.
She has something in mind for everyone else.
Yeah. She's like, hey, I've not known dwarves in a long time.
Yeah, what would a dwarf ask of the elves?
And he says, nothing.
Like, it's enough that I got to see you and hear your gentle words.
Gimli's so down bad, man.
Yeah. I love that she says, Hear all ye elves, she cried to those about her. Let none say again that dwarves are grasping and ungracious.
Such a backhanded compliment.
But you might, yeah, it is.
It's like, hey, we've been saying for years that dwarves are grasping and ungracious.
Right.
That the skill of the dwarves is in their hands rather than their tongues.
Yeah.
That they smell bad. That their wives have beards. That they're miserly and duplicitous. And Gimli's like, whoa. Like, stop with the compliments, please.
Yeah, right. But, you know, she keeps asking, you know, she keeps pushing.
She persists.
Him.
Yeah.
But she also can read people's minds.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like she kind of already knows what he wants, right? Like,
she's like, hey, you want my hair, don't you? You little freak.
Why don't you just announce before me and everyone gathered here what you actually want?
And it is an awkward gift and an awkward request.
Yeah. And
everybody like murmurs in astonishment. It's like
the other elves are sort of shocked. Yeah. They're like,
what
whoa.
This little guy say?
He wants her hair? He only asked for one.
Jeez.
He only asked for one strand, but she gives him three, and he's like, "When I get home, I'm gonna keep this in a crystal
Yeah, imperishable
ball or
crystal. Yeah, yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
and we'll like worship it." I think he stores the hair in the book from Moria. That's my
The Book of Mirazabul.
yeah. He puts it in there and closes it up, puts it back in his backpack. That's my
He's like,
guess. Although later on it says that he like touches his chest when, so maybe he like slipped it in his like breast pocket or something.
that little freak. I don't want to know what he did with that hair. And uh, uh, yeah, it's weird that he asked. I think it's really cool of Galadriel not to make him embarrassed and tell him no. But yeah,
But this hair thing has some cultural. What am I trying to say? This thing about hair, having a lock of your loved
yeah,
one's hair, used to be
yeah.
like a thing. And growing up, I had a friend who they had a framed. It looked like a framed wreath.
Yeah.
And I was like, "What is this?" One time, I was like, "What is this?" He's like, "Oh, that's my like great grandmother's hair." I was like, "What?" And it was like large, it was like this
It's a
much
lot.
hair,
Yeah.
and it was like woven into a wreath. I'm like, that is this very, very strange thing to
You can always
have.
imagine like somebody like in the trenches of World War One opening a locket.
Yeah, with like a what do you call it? When
Like a
it's
little
just a
braid
outline.
of hair.
No, but like an outline of somebody's face. It's
Oh, like
like
a
a
silhouette.
yeah. So it's you like open a locket. There's like a silhouette
Yeah.
and then a little lock of the
Yeah.
person's hair.
Yeah.
Really odd. Like we've like lost that completely.
Different strokes for different folks, man.
When next time I go on a trip, I'm gonna trim my beard and then give Elizabeth a Ziploc bag full of my beard hairs so she can remember me while I'm gone. Would that be romantic?
Is this romance?
I love you so
Uh,
much. Goodbye.
Here's a Ziploc. I love you so much. She would cast it in imperishable crystal. No.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean we've belabored how creepy and weird the gifts appear, but it's deeply sweet.
It is. I do think it comes across, and it's so well. I mean, it's well written, and it's very fairy
Talk about
tale.
ceremony. I mean, it's
Yeah, the ceremony kind of like makes it work. But then he also is told, "I say to you, Gimli, son of Glowin, that your hands shall flow with gold, and yet over you gold shall have no dominion."
yeah,
Unlike, most dwarves, I guess,
yeah,
and certainly the dwarves who accepted the rings of
yeah,
power from Sauron,
yeah,
who
yeah,
became kind of gold sick.
yeah.
So he gets a real blessing there too.
And she says, "I do not foretell, for all foretelling is now vain. On the one hand lies darkness, and on the other only hope. But if hope should not fail, then I say to you, Gimli, son of Glowin, your hands shall flow with gold, and yet over you no gold shall have dominion." So yeah, there it is again, her being like, I used to do a lot of foretelling, and that's not me anymore.
Mm-hmm. Then we get Frodo.
Frodo gets the file of Galadriel, which has incredible significance
Yeah,
when he reaches Mordor.
right,
And this holds the light of Earendel, who
right.
holds a Silmaril. This is the light of Venus, the morning star, and it's the father of Elrond who petitioned the powers to come and save elves and men from Morgoth, even though mortals had been banned from returning to Valinor. But through the Silmaril that Beren stole from the crown of Morgoth, he's able to kind of bust through the darkness and the fog that veiled Valinor and petition at great risk to himself petition for the Valar to come and defeat Morgoth. That's exactly what happens. And in reward for his bravery and courage, he is given the Silmaril and a flying ship to essentially guard the heavens from Morgoth's return.
Mm-hmm.
And he now, as an immortal, flies over Middle-earth, and the light of the Silmaril is visible as a symbol of hope.
Right.
And that's the light that's captured in the File of Galadriel.
Yeah. She's giving out the light of the Silmarils left and right here.
From her hair, from her file. Yeah, big time.
Yeah. Interesting.
So we're coming to the end here. They see her just grow smaller and smaller as they float down the river Anduin, and they are literally flowing back into normal time.
Mm-hmm.
And as they leave, you can feel the heaviness fall on them. It's cold, it's dreary. And it says, the travelers now turned their faces to the journey. The sun was before them, their eyes were dazzled, for all were filled with tears.
Mm.
Gimli wept openly. I think this exchange with Legolas is really beautiful.
Yeah. Tell me, Legolas, why did I come on this quest? Little did I know where the chief peril lay. Truly Elrond spoke, saying that we would not foresee what we might meet upon our road. Torment in the dark was the danger that I feared, and yet it did not hold me back. But I would not have come had I known the danger of light and joy. Now I've taken my worst wound in this parting, even if I were to go this night straight to the Dark Lord. Alas for Gimli, son of Glóin. And Legolas is like, nay, alas for us all.
Yeah.
And for all that walk the world in these after days. That's really after days. But he says, I count you blessed. Your loss you suffer of your own free will.
Yeah.
And you might have chosen otherwise, but you haven't forsaken your companions. And the least reward that you shall have is the memory of Lothlorien shall remain ever clear and unstained in your heart, and neither shall fade or grow stale. And then Gimli's like, well, elf memory works a little different than dwarf memory, maybe. That's kind of how elves sleep, is by like walking through their memories. I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, he's like, yeah, I can look on her in my memory, but it's like looking into a mirror.
Mm.
It's not like you can just go back and live in your memory like it's replayed.
Yeah, they have like perfect recall of their.
Yeah.
Like they can literally like remember perfectly, like right, put those things back together perfectly.
This is like kind of like a third reference to a mirror that we get in as many pages. You know, you have the mirror of Mirror.
Mm-hmm.
We have the mirror of Galadriel.
She says, remember the mirror of Galadriel, when she gives Frodo the file.
Yeah, it's like one of the last things she says to him.
Yeah. And you're right that they flow back into normal time because, you know, he says, well, we actually have to attend to the boat. Like the boat is way too long, way too low in the water, and all this baggage, and I don't want to drown my grief in cold water. So like, let's, pay attention to what we're doing here.
Let's get our eyes a little clear here.
Yeah. Yeah.
This might be a good thing to end on. We've kind of identified this metaphor of their choice, east or west, and kind of just the recognition, actually, that trying to make a way is not the way.
Yeah.
It's to flow down the river of fate.
Mm-hmm.
Not to say my will be done, but to say that my will is that what should be shall be.
Mm-hmm.
It's a resignation. It's a receiving of grace, not a not a grasping. Exactly. Legolas says here, "Alas for us all, and for all that walk the world in these after days. For such is the way of it, to find and lose, as it seems to those whose boat is on the running stream."
Yeah, so thank you for listening to the Wayward Wizards podcast. Next week, we will be reading Book 2, Chapter 9 of Fellowship of the Ring, The Great River. If you want to help us out, it'd be awesome if you would share this podcast with a Lord of the Rings fan in your life. And of course, you can follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can leave a review or subscribe on YouTube. And of course, visit waywardwizards.com for more info. If you want to get in touch with us, you can email us at info@waywardwizards, Zach@waywardwizards, or Logan@waywardwizards.com.
Until we meet again, do not trouble your hearts overmuch with thought of the road. Maybe the paths that you each shall tread are already laid before your feet, though you do not see them. We'll see you next week.
See ya.